The Nerdy Misfit Podcast with your hosts, Connor O'Neill and Matthew Hughes.
What is up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Nerdy Misfit Podcast.
Hello. Buongiorno.
You know, I'm realizing something on this current setup.
What?
Is that you're left-handed,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm right-handed.
Correct.
And I'm left-handed on my laptop right now.
Yeah, welcome to my life.
But if we switched, I would be right-handed on the laptop.
No, because your laptop would be over here.
But I could put it
Oh,
there,
but
and I
you
could
can,
use my right hand.
Do it this way. Oh, I'm totally right-handed with my laptop.
Oh, never mind. So you're learning something new about yourself.
Yeah.
But you're left-handed.
Life doesn't make sense, dude.
Left-handed for writing.
Left-handed for writing, left-handed for baseball, right-handed for cutting
What about,
with scissors.
excuse me?
I
What
cut
about
with
mouse?
my right hand. Right hand.
I get, but you were kind of forced, I guess, in a way.
Yeah.
But if you were to get a left-handed mouse, would you prefer?
I don't know. Like, I can do, like, the pad here on my laptop with left-handed. It's fine.
Well, yeah, everyone's laptop works with both hands.
I know, but I've never had, like, a...
Well, because they're not designed for
I
left-handed.
know, like
usually.
that's what I'm thinking. Like the clickers would be reversed,
Yeah, that would probably take a while to get used
or would
to.
that still be? Would that be a left click to a right click then, or would be a right click still be a right click? Like when you right click on
You
things, to
can
open
definitely
the menu.
change it in software either way.
I know that, but it just seems weird the more I think about it that way. Anyways,
Left-handed people.
the
Are
worst.
you left-handed in golf?
Yeah,
Left-handed in hockey?
never played.
Yeah, you know,
I presume I probably would be
probably
just based on
would make sense.
The worst is that I can for baseball I catch and throw with left hand. I can't catch with my.
What do
right
you mean
hand.
catch and throw? You catch with your glove, like the hand.
So basically, there's this guy in baseball that used to do this in the 80s and then or the 90s, I think, where he would catch with his left, like he'd have his mitt, he'd catch, then
And
he
then
would
you put it
throw
under?
the ball,
Oh, okay.
put his glove in his right armpit, grab the ball when it came back down, and throw it, and put his glove back on. That's how I play baseball, and it's atrocious.
Yeah, that's wrong.
I can't throw with my right hand. I don't know what it is. Like it's just not going. Like I have no sense of direction.
So catch with your right hand.
I suck at catching with my right hand too.
Because I'm right-handed,
Yeah.
so I throw with my right hand because that's your dominant hand. That's how you're going to throw farther
Exactly.
and more accurate.
But catching with my left,
But
my right
you
just
teach-
doesn't.
You teach your bad hand to be the catch. Because
Yeah,
all it
I
has
know
to
that.
do is this.
Yeah, I know what guys. You
They're
know,
like crab.
just this
Crab hands.
Meh, it just doesn't work though.
You just have to crab it.
Crab it. Crab the ball, kids. Crab the balls.
I don't think you should do that at all, actually. I think that you should really avoid doing that at all costs.
Instant regret. Anyways,
Glad you said that, not me.
I just don't like how we made eye contact at the same time.
Yeah, so today we have a fun topic we've discussed. We've discussed kind of before in a different way, but also we've talked off podcast about having for a while.
Yep.
And that's about mainstream.
What is mainstream?
Well, let me tell you. So,
Do you already have the definition
mainstream
ready?
is prevailing current or direction of activity or influence.
Wow.
Yeah, I had the definition ready.
In other words, the idea, attitudes, and activities that regard as normal or conventional, the dominant trend in opinion, fashion,
Yeah, that's probably a better way of wording it.
or in the arts.
So I thought we would talk about this, and the reason this topic came up is because I was at a friend's house. Well, I would say recently, but now it hasn't been recently. It's been a while now. And what I think we were discussing anime.
Mm-hmm.
They're not an anime fan.
Yeah.
Preface that by saying that. And we just got into a discussion of whether anime was mainstream, which we won't talk about right now. We'll leave that for later in the discussion for anime specifically. But the idea of what constitutes something as being mainstream in general. And what he said was, if my mom knows what it is, then it's mainstream. Which I feel like is in its own way is kind of a fair way of.
To an extent, but if your mom's not hip with the times.
Well, yeah, exactly. That's the problem. Like, that's a good gauge for some people.
Yeah. Is your mom still reading Reader's Digest? Then I don't know if she's up with the times.
Because, so what are some big things right now that you would say are mainstream?
Superhero movies.
Superhero movies, more specifically, obviously Marvel.
Book Talk. So that
Book
is something
Talk?
you might have. So because you're not
Is
big
that
on the
for the
TikTok.
educated?
Book Talk is.
Or you're just going by TikTok and you can even make it broader.
TikTok in general, but
is
certain
mainstream.
trends. So there's certain book sales that have skyrocketed because of what's called
But are
Book
those
Talk.
what are becoming trends because of
Well, those
TikTok?
books are becoming more trendy, more mainstream enough that if you go to chapters, they have a section be like, "What's popular in Book Talk?"
That's
So
just being smart.
is
I
that-
think that's smart sales on
I
on
agree.
chapters. But I see what you're saying. Like that's a big bookstore. That's a big bookstore. This isn't like
Yeah.
a mom and pop. This is a corporate level bookstore that's being impacted by social media.
by
to be
the
like, hey,
mainstream social media aspects.
be like, hey,
you
this
know.
is popular. We should show off stuff that people talk about on TikTok
exactly.
to try and
Thus,
get
those
people
books are getting more
in.
mainstream, like the Akatar series. So that's like Sarah J. Maas is getting bigger and bigger because of Book Talk, because of TikTok.
But are the series continuing because of this, or
So Sarah J. Maas
continuing their-
specifically is getting bigger, and she's
Yeah.
writing more because
continuing their popularity through the series? Because I feel like sometimes on TikTok we see, like there's something trending and it's cool for a
It's-
week or two,
that's
and you
when-
can definitely see sales, perhaps, like for
Yeah.
example, like a book being increased, but then once that initial
that. It's still going
high
high.
point, it just dies. So, do all books have that, or is it just some series? The better series end up just getting that notice that they kind of deserved, and now getting that extra sales and hopeful deals for extending series and whatnot.
I would say, like, originally, certain books, yes, here and there. But there's certain books that have gotten, like, I just have an article here, for example. Cain's Jawbone, a book from 1939, okay? And from October 2019 to June 2022, because of Book Talk, sales went up 235,000%. Which,
Yeah,
to be
but that's
fair,
what-
that's a book but that's over the span of over 2.5 years.
Okay, so that's better, because when you see some of those jumps, sometimes it's for that period of
So that's
time.
3.5 years.
Yeah, so this is over a good course of time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, social media can definitely be used, and I feel like TikTok has helped show off smaller creators, especially when it comes into like books.
Yeah.
Kind of just show off, what people aren't seeing because maybe they don't have the advertising budget, or they're just, they're hidden on the shelves. They're not really just
The hidden wonders kind of situation. Yeah. But outside of that, yeah, superhero movies is another big one. I mean, that we've been on that
I
mainstream
think any
trend.
big show that's going on, like you think of Game of Thrones when it was going on. You think of
What's the big show right now? Like, is it weird if I say Young Sheldon?
Yes, I was thinking Stranger Things.
Stranger Things kind of that.
Well,
I
now
think
it's
the ratings
over,
went
right?
down.
Or
I
is
think
it
there's
still-
supposed to be one more season.
But that's definitely a mainstream show.
Yeah, the Star Wars shows.
Would you say Star Wars is mainstream? I guess Star Wars overall is.
Star Wars as
But
a whole is mainstream.
I think the not movies, all the shows.
It's
and
one of those things. If you have Disney Plus, you're probably going to. But then that's a niche technically of mainstream because what streaming service is mainstream? Netflix, Disney Plus, Amazon Prime.
whatever has the most popular thing at the time.
That's also a fact, So what is the most popular thing right now?
Piracy.
That's fair. I don't know what.
Um,
I'm assuming it's probably some show on
The
Amazon
internet is
Prime.
going to that direction.
It's true.
There's so many streaming services where Netflix was like a solution,
Yeah. Or once
to
upon a
cable
time.
and having all these issues, and
Yeah.
you're like, hey, I'm just going to pay this relatively decent
small
amount
$6 a month fee
and
at the
actually
time.
get on-demand versions of shows, movies that I like. And then when Netflix first started making its own content, you were like, oh, these are some good stuff. I think like Orange is the New Black, House of Cards.
Yeah.
And now we're turning into,
We're going back in time.
now it's just like cable where it's like, oh, you need to pay for this. You need to pay
You
for
need
this.
to pay
you
for
need
this
to pay
channel and this channel.
Everyone
and this
wants to do
channel.
a monthly because they just want to see that income, right?
Yeah.
Like that. Okay, we've got people, this many users for this month, this month, this
Yeah.
month, this month.
I can't say too much. I pay for 4 freaking streaming services.
And yeah, I would say that a lot of people are being pushed to
Well, max.
the high seas of the internet.
Yeah.
They're looking for the One Piece.
They're looking for the One Piece. The way to watch it illegally. Like, I don't know what the mainstream show is right now, in all honesty.
The Bear. I
think that was, I would say, that'd be the big
But the
Disney
thing
Plus
is,
one.
Is it still, if the show is still going on? Because it got renewed.
Yeah,
right? The show's not over.
No, but I think there's the hiccups, right? Where
So
like
is that
it's the waiting
mainstream
period.
or is that initial
trend.
hype from when it's going on? Yeah, like a trend.
Yeah.
Or a fad.
I guess it would be a fad. But I think
fad shows are things that end.
Yeah.
They're popular for that little bit and then they're just
the
done.
1 or 2 seasons, and then it just kind of gets
Trendy
canceled.
shows are shows that last a little bit longer.
Yeah.
And then there's shows that stand the test of time and become mainstream, and then become iconic.
Yeah. I think
like Game of Thrones was on that level until.
But what's the difference between a trend and mainstream? You know what I mean? Like, think about before superhero movies, for example, right? There was young adult book to movie adaptations. Was that a trend or was that mainstream?
It's definitely started as a trend.
It started as a trend, yeah. Just as the first Iron Man started as a trend.
Yeah, and then it's exploded into mainstream. I think mainstream is also, like you said, it's for a while the superhero movies were for people that knew the superheroes.
Yeah.
Right? You know, you think of Spider-Man's very popular. That's why he always got Batman very popular. That's why they always kind of had the films. But people who are really excited for those movies are comic book fans.
Yeah, to start off.
The MCU has pushed, and I would also say the Dark Knight trilogy, in all honesty, has opened superheroes to being more than just like a, pow, bam, kind of. I think like the expectation that people are going to think it's super nerdy.
Yeah.
Like cringy. And they've turned it into, well, especially if you look at the MCU formula of like kind of interpreting that or involving a lot of laughter and the jokes, and it's very family friendly. Kids can see it, but adults can enjoy it. Nerds can watch it and nitpick stuff. Like I think of when we saw Civil War, obviously very, very different to Civil War, the comic book. But it was still fun for us as comic book fans because we're also nitpicking, like, I guess you have to go in not serious either, because now that I'm thinking about it, there were probably a lot of people that were very not happy about it. But I enjoyed, what I enjoyed about Civil War was how they made it relate to the MCU, like the way they took it. They're like, hey, we need to make this make sense in the universe we've already established. Spider-Man's not an established character. How do we introduce him in this movie?
Yeah.
I did enjoy a lot of the way they handled certain characters within that film, and like the Soviet Accords. I really like the Soviet Accords for how they brought a very similar issue to what was going on in the comics.
Yeah.
To the MCU.
I'm going to take it one step further here too and tie it kind of back into mainstream. Is the MCU did something where they brought B-list characters, potentially C-list depending who you ask. Like Iron Man was not an A-list character in the comics at the time.
I would say a B-list.
He was B-list. Ant-Man, definitely not an A-list character.
Guardians
of the Galaxy, definitely not an A-list group of people. Right? I think they brought those characters into mainstream.
I see what you're saying. So now they're mainstream because people recognize the Guardians of the Galaxy.
Exactly.
Now.
Like
whereas before it would only be maybe not even a comic book fan potentially.
No,
right?
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like when you see it, like a picture of everyone knows who Baby Groot is.
Well, that's fair. Yeah,
that's a particular big one.
I think of when I was a lot more into collecting comic books and Guardians 1 was coming out. You're like, oh, like I'm really excited, because you always read. You read like your comic books, but then you knew of like some more.
Yeah, more. I mean, C-list characters.
Just like whether you collected or read a story or just read something on them before.
Yeah.
And I remember you being like, "Oh, like this is a team of this and this and this and this," and I was like, "I've never heard of these people in my life."
That's fair.
What are you saying to me right now? Because they're not as involved in a lot of the big stories in comics.
They're mostly
either.
off-world, like they're doing.
But
their
now
own
they
thing.
are.
Yeah.
They play major roles in some Marvel stories.
Yeah, I mean, like they visited the symbiote planet. That was a big thing that I was obviously a big fan of. And then they connected with the X-Men because I'm pretty sure Star-Lord and Kitty Pryde were a thing for a little bit. and then other people joined the Guardians of the Galaxy. The thing I think was part of Guardians of the Galaxy after Secret Wars 3, like there was a bunch of stuff going on.
Yeah.
Right? So I think the MCU did a good way of
popularity equals mainstream in a way, obviously.
In a way, I think there's a couple more factors to that. But
influence, like in the definition, right? Like influence of something. So, for example, Marvel impacting other studios to try and catch up or create. Like you think of Warner Brothers with DC and what they're obviously tried to rush version an their own version of the MCU. So you can say that they're almost creating new. They basically created a whole new style of film.
Yeah, to an extent, I agree with that.
Right, which I don't think would have been impossible without the original X-Men's and Spider-Man.
Yeah, when you think of the first X-Men movie, that came out 24 years ago.
And without those, we don't get where we are now.
No, definitely not.
For the MCU. But the MCU and Disney, they took it to a whole new level that now other studios strive for. And we're talking, they normalized hitting $1 billion.
They normalized post-credit scenes.
That's also true.
Because
that
is insane to think about.
A very common thing. Influenced a lot of people.
Well, because before the MCU, the X-Men did have post-credit scenes. The Pirates of the Caribbean films had post-credit scenes. But not a lot of other films had post-credit scenes unless it was like the comedic bits, like the credits rolling and there's some like extra clips kind of thing.
Well, now they know you're doing it, so now they even troll you.
Oh, it's bait.
Yeah.
But it's become too full
It used to be something that led into either the next film for that character or
build up hype for something else.
Or connecting some dots for the canon of the MCU. And now it's just sometimes they're just
a meme.
Awful.
Just a meme.
They're just making fun of you almost. So obviously, and then the other thing is, I think for mainstream in the West is obviously a lot different to mainstream in Japan or India or wherever, right? Like we obviously live in the West and we live in North America, so we're our own bubble. We have our own mainstream. So then I guess you could almost say there's layers, like, a ladder of locally mainstream into working its popularity up the bars, right? So I guess that comes to, is anime mainstream? Because it's obviously safe to say comics and especially comic book movies are mainstream.
Yeah, so those are for sure mainstream.
They're basically like with rom-coms now.
Yeah.
Like that, to that level of like, oh, I'm going to go see a rom-com. Oh, I'm going to go see whatever superhero movies out right now.
I think when it comes to anime, and I'll get manga out of the way. Manga is not mainstream.
I don't think manga is mainstream yet.
That's comics to movies situation. Comics is mainstream, movies is mainstream.
The proof, there's a very easy way to prove that, which is the publishing companies for us in North America definitely pay attention and choose the series they want to publish wisely.
100%.
Not every series that's serializing in Japan
is going to get adaptation in North America.
Because obviously they have to have translations and obviously it has to be printed. And we have series that are extremely popular in Japan. I think of Kingdom as being one of the biggest ones, and we don't have a Kingdom here because I don't think there's any way of really reading it legally.
Yeah.
Which obviously, if you can't read it legally online, like there's no numbers to show that it deserves
the
English
official adaptation.
English release. But I just think that whoever is in charge of these companies, I think of obviously Viz, Dark Horse, I think KC is another one where they're like, nah, I don't want to risk it.
Yeah.
One, because it's so long.
Yeah.
I think that also has an impact because if it's a shorter series, then you just be like, nope, it didn't work. We know that this genre or this isn't gonna work.
Yeah, manga definitely. I 100% agree with that.
I will say it's growing.
Yeah, manga sales are growing in the West. I
think of when we go to, and this could be different for different places, but I've been to a couple Indigos in the States, and I've been to our chapters that we have close to us, and I will say the manga shelves are growing.
Yeah, the manga shelves are growing
for our chapter specifically. Remember, it used to be just in that corner,
one little bit, and now it's like a full little section.
Whole section.
Yeah,
so that's already promising.
I think manga sales are definitely growing. That obviously helps with social media and new anime seasons airing.
Popular anime series,
which
yeah.
popular anime series. But that kind of grows back into the
And I
question.
think it's also comes with youth too. Think of people who work at those bookstores. There's a lot more younger people who are, and that might be something that they just read, right? Because at Indigo and Chapters, there's a lot of the recommendations from staff.
Yeah.
And we always see on the recommendation, there's always at least one.
Yeah.
Most of the time, more than one manga on the recommended by a staff member.
Milo.
Right? So that helps too, because I feel like maybe someone goes there and they're like, hey, I'm looking for something, or whether it's even a comic book fan, which we just said, comics are a bit more mainstream than, or maybe not full level mainstream, but they definitely made a big comeback to where they were.
Yeah.
And maybe a comic book fan goes, I'm going to give a manga a try.
Yeah. I think
they're in the same section too.
They're connected. But going back to anime, is anime mainstream? I think it's confusing because to me, there's certain shows that I'm like, yeah, that could be.
It falls under the line of your mom might not know what anime is, right? This is what you're saying. But when I think of something like, if we go to My Anime List, for example, this isn't the best example either because My Anime List, obviously, you have to be at least somewhat into anime to create a My Anime List.
Yeah.
To have your data be reflected here. But for example, if we sort by most popular series, so this is people who actually have accounts and have put either, I think it's based on the people who either have it in their in their list in some way, whether it's their watch later or they're completed or currently watching, and that's Attack on Titan, which is almost at 4 million. And I guarantee you, we can probably add at least 2 million people, because I think that's safe to say that there's probably a good amount of people who don't care enough to create a My Anime List or care enough, but watched it. Right? So, and Death Note's right up there. Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood's right up there. I think Death Note and Attack on Titan both being on Netflix helps a lot.
Yeah.
But that's a good amount of people on a tracking website.
Yeah, a single tracking website
that you'd have to sign up for.
Yeah. I think we'll get into this more, but I want to keep this broad for the time being because there's certain aspects of anime or certain animes that I would find to be mainstream.
And there's also parts of anime that I think you can say are iconic and have shown up in other media.
Yeah, and vice versa.
Yes, for sure. I think like the bike slide.
Yep.
Akira. From Akira.
We've seen that
media all over the
science
place.
fiction all the time right now. Not just now, like over the years.
Over the years, we have it in older films. We have it in current films, current cartoons. Like it's kind of like Dune references. Like once you know what it's from, you start seeing it everywhere.
Yeah.
Like for example, obviously Dune right now could be potentially mainstream, becoming mainstream. It's definitely trending.
Mainstream. It's trending right now. Yeah.
And I'm part of that wave.
You're part of that Dune train.
I'm riding the wave.
You're riding that Dune worm.
I'm riding the Dune worm. I'm running that sandworm.
Yes, sir.
And it all of a sudden you start seeing things I've seen before. And I'm like, that's a Dune reference. That's referencing Dune. But you never saw it before.
Yeah.
And I think that that's the same. A lot of people might not know that iconic bike slide's from Akira.
Yeah.
But then once you've watched Akira, you're like, I see it everywhere. Every time it happens, I'm like, that's what I think about.
I think there's certain aspects of anime that could be mainstream. I think having different platforms like Netflix, Disney Plus, Crunchyroll, obviously.
It's not helping, but that's, for me, that's more so ruining the chances for maybe some good series to explode.
Agreed. So I think anime as a whole, not quite mainstream.
I think it's
it's almost there, but there's certain subcategories of animes. Like, would you classify Pokemon to be mainstream?
Yes.
That's what I mean. So, like, Pokemon is that category, but then Pokemon's like its almost
But is it mainstream because of its anime? No. Because of the games.
Because of the games, both the trading card game
then evolving into being like, oh, but there's the show.
Yeah, but Ash is finally the champion, guys. You know?
Yeah. Yu-Gi-Oh! Less so than Pokemon.
Used to be mainstream.
Used to be way more popular.
Yeah.
I guess like you think of any show that can sell a product.
Yeah.
Which potentially is another episode we might talk about, but I think that that's something in the West, in a very capitalist world.
Can this sell toys?
Can this sell toys?
Yes.
Can we make a lot of money off of this?
Perfect.
Put it on then.
Exactly.
We'll take it. We'll take this show from Japan.
That's how certain like kid shows we watched growing up got made, because they're like, "Oh, we can make this into a toy line."
Toys make a ton of money. That's what Disney wanted when they picked up Star Wars.
Exactly.
Well, I mean, you can probably tell they didn't care.
They wanted the toys, man.
They didn't care about
that
those
deal
movies.
with Hasbro. Are you kidding me?
They didn't care about the movies. They cared about being like, we have the license to sell Star Wars stuff. Yeah. That's money.
Which is crazy.
So much
Disney
money.
don't did it.
But yeah, I think you could argue there are anime that break into the mainstream, is what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
Certain anime like Pokemon. I do think something like Attack on Titan, Demon Slayer, Death Note, those easy to understand. Well, I say Attack on Titan. Attack on Titan is just a lot of blood, gore, violence.
Yeah.
I feel like it hits a lot of notes that people like in
Yeah.
TV shows. They just have to get over this is animated.
Mhm.
Because I think another issue is a lot of people maybe not move on. Like, a lot of people might not watch season 2 Attack on Titan, but they've seen season 1. They're like, yeah, that was epic.
Yeah.
And I think it's probably the same for Demon Slayer. But I think those easier to digest shows are a little bit more mainstream. Or maybe they hit with certain audiences more.
This is my question. Does nostalgia have a play in mainstream?
Nostalgia plays a factor because of familiarity, but I don't know if it
plays a direct factor.
Yeah, because you think of right now, we've got Pokemon's obviously mainstream because we have generation after generation now that's grown up with Pokemon. But if you were to ask a generation 20 years older than us, they're not going to know. They might know what Pokemon is, but they're not going to care or think it's that relevant.
Yeah, that makes sense.
In my opinion, maybe that
makes sense. I agree with that.
Whereas we're definitely riding the wave of seeing anime become increasingly more popular.
Yeah.
Right? We see you can go out and ask someone and they might know a few shows. We'll have to, maybe we go on the stream, we start asking people if they can name.
I think a big thing to show that anime is becoming mainstream, and this is a big one for me, is the fact that in North America, we're getting more theatrical releases.
I was also thinking stars.
Yeah.
Your more classic stars might say, "Oh yeah, I like anime," or "I was inspired."
Oh yeah,
by this.
Jamie Lee Curtis being like, "Oh yeah, I freaking love One Piece." Henry Cavill, Michael B. Jordan.
With that said, some of them do come off more of like, are they saying this because they want to be relevant with what's popular or becoming popular?
No, that's also a fair point.
Right? Because then we also have people like Kim Kardashian that say, "Oh yeah, I like anime," and you're like,
"Do you, Mom?
Are you just saying that, or are you actually an anime fan?" Yeah, Michael B. Jordan is a good example of someone that definitely takes inspiration in some of his movies from characters, from shows that he likes.
You know what? Is it the Olympics that people are doing One Piece?
No, there's celebrations everywhere. There's a player for Borussia Dortmund, which is a soccer or football club in Germany. And he does a Trafalgar Law celebration for a lot of his goals where he'll do the room. He'll be like this for room.
That's what I mean. I think
his own team has done edits. Like on
amazing.
Instagram where they'll literally have like the Japanese voice actor being like room.
That's
and
amazing.
then you'll see like a little effect around.
That's good.
And that's a big football team.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I think it's slowly becoming mainstream, but then
and we've seen collabs with like Blue Lock, the soccer manga anime, and partner with other soccer teams for some clothing and whatnot.
Well, even like big companies, like didn't Vans do a team up with One Piece?
I think Vans has done a few different, but Vans has always been more of the hipster.
Yeah, that's fair.
And I feel like in some ways, some anime, especially if you go further back in time, is a little hipstery. Like, I'm into this anime stuff, whatever.
I'm into the OG Studio Ghibli.
I'm watching these cartoons. They're from Japan. They're much higher.
You've probably never heard
quality.
of Yu Yu Hakusho before.
They follow an actual story. They're not just
They're
not
not episodic 2 episodes in one. It's not your Phineas and Ferb.
Yeah, like you have to follow each episode.
Yeah,
You
really need to understand the core of what the main character is doing.
Yeah, and I mean that it is true, and it has definitely gone insanely up. And you could argue that 10 years from before, maybe you get bullied for being an anime fan, or maybe you just don't tell people.
Yeah.
Have we passed that line of if you tell someone you like anime, they just don't automatically assume it's hentai?
Yeah.
You were answering my question before.
I knew exactly where you were going with that, and I 100% think it's true. I think it's more casual now to be like, yeah, like I watch anime, and people are like,
people
okay.
just don't think of like, oh, you're into weird tentacle stuff. Yeah, I know. I think that means we're in the right direction. We're going in the right direction. Maybe the wrong direction.
Well, I think it's becoming more socially acceptable, and I think also like D&D, for example.
I was gonna
is
say
another big one.
D&D, which was obviously popular, and we talked to Tim. We had Tim on the podcast and talk about stuff about D&D in the past.
Yeah,
we talked about the whole cultist thing.
But I think D&D, for example, like if you told me 10 years ago that there was going to be a D&D movie,
it's like an RPG boom.
Yeah, well, I think pandemic obviously had a little bit to do with that.
Helped immensely, but
Stranger Things helped a little bit too. But
Stranger
Critical
Things,
Role,
2 massive things in the media sphere right now.
And I think RPGs is becoming mainstream because it's not just Dungeons and Dragons
Monopoly
anymore. It is.
Because now RPGs, it just reminds me of, say, like you're taking D&D, right?
Yeah.
And D&D's Monopoly.
Mm-hmm.
And now you're like, wow, people like Avatar: The Last Airbender. We're making an Avatar: The Last Airbender version of Monopoly.
Yeah.
Oh, people
With
like
different
Marvel. Marvel Monopoly.
Well, no, it can't be Monopoly, though. It's got to be like Marvelopoly because they don't own the rights to Monopoly.
But you know what I mean? Like, that's what it feels like now, where they're like, hey,
you get an RPG and you get an RPG.
Whether they don't want to partner with Wizards of the Coast, because potentially whether they want to have their own money or they're charging too much to use whatever the case may be. Some people I can definitely see, greed, like, hey, we're just going to create our own version.
And if it sells, it sells.
Make it L. But all these very popular IPs are now getting RPGs.
Yeah. Well, like it started with D&D, and now, I mean, there's Power Rangers, there's Transformers, G.I. Joe, My Little Pony, Last Airbender, Marvel, Fallout is getting popular again for the RPG. There's Stargate, there's Star Wars, Force and Destiny, which came out in 2015 and is becoming a comeback again.
Too many to name.
There's too many. Yeah, like I was at the board game store.
We should have had Tim, and he could have gone through the list.
This one. This is the ones I own. Blah 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 blah.
But I would say RPGs have definitely are becoming something I think RPGs hit home with that anime might not is with a little bit of the older crowd, because there's a chance a little bit of the older have played or dabbled.
Yeah.
And now it's like, hey, it's okay. You don't have to hide that you like this. Play it.
Play it, guys.
It's also a good way of meeting new friends if you're not, the most social. It's like, I think there's a lot of places like on Discord and safe places that you can play the game and learn the game or meet new people that have that interest.
I think also, I think it's also because there's big content creators also playing D&D now, right? Like outside of just Critical Role, like it's become socially acceptable to roll dice.
And I think obviously the internet has had such a massive play on what has become mainstream and what can be mainstream.
Yeah.
Connecting maybe without the internet, you are just weird that you have these Japanese random Blu-rays or whatever.
Posters or something.
Yeah, exactly. Where you're just like, where'd you get that? Because they would have been imported or
exactly.
a lot harder to get. And now you look at stuff now and it's everywhere. We've got anime alone has 4 streaming sites that you can legal streaming sites that you can get anime. You have Crunchyroll, you have High Dive, some is on Prime, some is on Netflix, some is starting to be on Disney Plus. So it's if it's not already, I would say it's 80 to 85% of the way there.
Yeah.
Where some of those big shows are definitely noticeable, or the nostalgic shows. are recognizable as not just, oh, I watched that cartoon. Oh yeah, I watched that anime when I was a
like
kid.
I watched Pokemon the anime or like Dragon Ball.
Yep. And then it's not just a cartoon, I think
Yeah.
is another big asterisk. It wasn't just a cartoon I watched. It was, oh, I've seen that anime. Like I'm not that into it, but
Yeah.
I've seen the Pokemon anime. I've seen
The
Beyblade.
Yu-Gi-Oh, Beyblade, Dragon Ball, Zatch Bell.
So here on my prep sheet, I've got, this is going to be I think the hardest question. What do you think is going to be mainstream next? Or is
Anime is
outside
a
of
big
anime,
thing.
because obviously we just talked about how it's on the up and up. Is there something that you've seen that is definitely on the trending high, like that it's on the trend part of the rise?
This is going to be a weird one.
Is it going to pass that into mainstream?
This is going to be weird, but, and you may not agree with this, reading. And the reason why I say
The
that,
action of reading.
yeah, like I
I
think,
mean, I could see it.
like when we were kids, like people would read, and then I think a lot of us when we got to high school, we just gave up reading as
Or
much.
even before high school.
Even before high school, right? And then I think because of social media and everything like that, and all the movies and everything, and it being like comic books mostly, for example, for being that mainstream, a lot of people just stopped reading, especially after like the young adult book adaptation phase of movies.
Yeah, after Harry Potter, basically.
Pretty much, yeah. But nowadays, like Percy Jackson sales went up. Dune sales are coming back up. And me working at a coffee shop over the last like 6 years, I'm seeing more and more kids, people around our age, few years younger, few years older, coming into a coffee shop
Just enjoying a
and
book?
reading a book.
Yeah, okay, I can see that. That's fair.
And outside of just that aspect, because of the pandemic, unfortunately, with people with mental health, a lot more people are picking up self-help books, self-inspiration books too, and I'm finding those books are becoming more popular and more common too. And with the rise of TikTok and book talk, for example, wrapping what we talked about at the beginning of the episode.
Well, and people just making it, they're making reading seem fun.
Exactly.
As opposed to just being like, oh, yeah.
You have to read it for class.
Yeah, you have to read for class. But reading books, if the books are enjoyable, can be a great time.
Exactly. So as weird as that sounds, I think reading
I was going to say Dune.
Dune specifically would be on the track to be mainstream as long as they nail the third movie.
I think definitely struggled to hit that true stride, but these movies, the past two movies, have definitely helped. And the third that we do know is coming could potentially solidify it as one of those iconic trilogies now.
Yeah.
If it ends up being well received, that is.
I'd agree with that for sure.
What else would I say that is kind of on that trending mountain, haven't peaked to the full mainstream? We didn't talk about gaming. Gaming is definitely mainstream.
Yeah. That's pretty straightforward.
Hey, people, but whether it has negative
connotations or not.
Yeah, there's maybe not all positive stuffs about it, but it is definitely mainstream overall. What else would you say is mainstream? We should have had a guest on. This would have been easier to have someone that's more into something else.
Yeah, I'm trying to.
That we're not as familiar
it's like,
with.
to me, I'm trying to separate trends and mainstream in my head.
And I'm trying to think of non-nerdy things.
Yeah.
I know this is the Nerdy Misfit podcast,
but still, yeah.
Cooking?
I thought about cooking and like foodies kind of thing.
Like cooking for yourself, but like cooking well.
Yeah. Learning how
Although
to
it's
cook.
expensive. But having the know-how. Like
being poor is mainstream in this economy.
But being able to cook.
Yeah.
Or understanding how to cook. It seems
more mainstreamy, getting there.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, I understand obviously everyone cooks to live, but I mean there's cooking and then there's cooking, like knowing how to cook.
There's craft dinner versus making a pasta dish.
Yeah, exactly. There's throwing it in the oven.
Cheese powder, making your own cheese sauce.
Exactly. There's throwing it in the oven and waiting for it to heat up to package directions, and then there's, oh, I made this from scratch.
Yeah, very different.
And I understand some people have time, doesn't mean you don't know how to cook, but I just think overall, and this could also be because of social media, where we now see, I'm even just thinking young people, how many young people are on social media that are cooking?
Yeah.
Where, like, I feel like when I was a kid, none of my friends knew how to cook, where I was interested in it. Yeah. And now I feel like it's very common to see kids that are like, hey, I know this because of massive content creators that cook, or
The only cooking content we had growing up, I'm pretty sure, was like Epic Mealtime, and that was just
In terms of YouTube, yes. I
Yeah.
mean, I watched the heck out of the Food Network.
that's fair.
I loved the Food Network. That stuff is great. Some great chefs on there.
Heck yeah.
Great home cooks.
Heck yeah.
But yeah, YouTube is now the Food Network in terms of like
Yeah, in a way.
a lot of people are probably going to go when I'm looking up a recipe. First of all, I find it extremely irritating when I look up a recipe on Google and then you click on whatever page you go to and you have to scroll 8 years. Like you get the life story before you get the recipe.
Yeah.
So I'm more prone to go to just YouTube now
That's
and then
fair.
go to one of the creators I've seen before or watched many of their videos. And I'm like, I know that the food they're making is quality. Or it
that makes
seems like
sense, yeah.
most of the time it's good quality. Some of them may be a little too extra. Like I think of Josh Weissman and he's like making his own buns. And I'm going to pick up my own buns. But
Yeah.
I usually am like, I can trust this recipe is going to be good because I've made a few of these dishes before.
Oh, it tracks.
And the last
Final
question.
question.
Last one. You want to
Yeah.
ask it?
What do you think is falling out of the mainstream and why?
Superhero movies.
Superhero, that's the big one.
Is that the
big
one you were thinking of too?
I mean, the fact
We
that
used it as such a big example of what is mainstream.
and it's falling out. We went from having
And-
3 Marvel movies a year to 1,
To be fair,
There's reasons for that.
There were some issues this year.
but even still, like
But the reception behind the films that have come out the past 2 years,
both Warner Brothers and Disney
Have
Star Wars
not
films,
been-
just
even
Star
if they're
Wars,
good.
but
or better than what people are saying.
yeah,
We have gone out on the limb defending the Marvels,
yeah, definitely,
and people act like it's one of the worst Marvel films ever made.
yeah, which is not true.
I
I
just
can-
think people are burnt out.
Yeah.
We've had a whole episode on burnout. Check it out. I don't know what episode number it is, but
Couldn't tell you on the top of my head,
definitely check it out. We have talked about it.
but I think there's
A combination of burnout and not doing something different. The problem with a lot of the MCU films, and
it
this is
became
the
repetitive.
This is the downside of making it for everyone is you're following that formula every single time, and now people that might not be if you release a superhero film about a hero that you're interested in, let's say the X-Men.
Mhm.
If you're a comic book fan of the X-Men, you're like, hell yeah, another X-Men film, let's go.
Yeah.
But at this point, there's a lot of the normal mainstream people, the normies of that make up mainstream, that are gonna be like, another superhero film.
Yeah,
I don't know if I'm gonna see that.
yeah, and then unfortunately, it is the burnout of everything that becomes mainstream. Eventually, will burn out.
Because there's too much of it.
Exactly.
It gets oversaturated.
You get spoon fed too
Yeah.
much.
Yeah, the market is oversaturated now
Yeah.
with superhero films, and we got also spoiled in a way, you could say, for phase 1 to phase 4.
Yeah, definitely.
Spoiled for this ultimate payoff. And I don't know if we'll ever get that payoff again in terms of maybe we will,
Maybe we will.
but I doubt it.
Yeah.
It was like, it almost feels like it's a once in a lifetime.
Had to be there.
Had to
Where
be
were
there.
you when Endgame came out to theaters?
Well, I saw that people were actually just talking about it recently, which was Endgame apparently came out 5 years ago, which is also the blip.
Yeah.
Like remember when we all watched
True, yeah.
when we all watched the
We're now
Infinity-
caught up to the MCU
yeah,
almost
when
in
we
real
watched
time.
the first part and they're like, "Oh yeah, we started Endgame 5 years later." And you're like, "Oh, that's so long." Yeah, well, it's 5 years later. Do you remember what happened?
Jeez Louise.
Yeah. Fun fact. And that's another thing before we end on mainstream, which is references.
Yeah.
If people make references to stuff like turning to dust,
Mm-hmm.
for example, you're referencing a movie. That movie's obviously mainstream if people are understanding that,
If people are understanding the reference, yeah.
right? So that's another thing. If references are in a lot of media and whatnot,
Mm-hmm.
or mentioned on stuff. Yeah, mainstream. Hopefully, this podcast.
We're hoping. Share with
Probably
your friends. You never know. We're growing a little bit every week.
Hope so. But yeah, that was our conversation on mainstream.
Yeah.
Just came up randomly.
Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.
This is going to be
We're
on
on
our
all
YouTube.
major podcasting platforms. RIP
What?
Google Podcast. Yes, we are on YouTube now.
Crazy concept.
And
And we're doing videos now on YouTube.
yes, mostly will be videos.
Mostly
Last
moving
week's was not
forward.
because it was filmed.
Recorded
It was-
months
yeah.
ago.
Yeah.
But in
But
theory,
definitely
moving
check it out.
forward,
It was so good.
so good. We got our own site.
I
You
don't
can
even
see we
remember
look
what the
like.
Sinister Six was.
It was such a good episode, though. If you haven't checked out last week's episode, or if you're listening to this in the future, episode 101, the second episode of season 2.
And if you think we're wrong, join our Discord and tell us we're wrong.
wanna
we would.
know.
We want
I want someone to argue with
yeah,
us on this.
converse with us. Like
Exactly.
who's in
Who's
your
in your
Sinister
Sinister
Six?
Six?
What's
That's
mainstream?
Batman.
Are we
What
wrong?
is mainstream?
Are we just?
Did we miss something huge that's mainstream
Yeah.
or used to be
Well,
mainstream?
I mean, we definitely did.
We did, but what was it?
Are we deluded? Is anime actually mainstream, or is it not mainstream at all? Or is it just because we're in that pocket that it feels like it's
Exactly.
more popular than it is? Let us know. Join our Discord. It's in the description down below in our link tree.
Yeah.
And like Matt said, we're on video now for YouTube. Hello,
YouTube.
YouTube.
Hello.
But yeah, and if you start seeing some shorts of our YouTube clips, shout out to Ebats.
Yeah, you bets. Thank you.
And we have some fun content coming up for sure. Once
This is the most we've been prepared. I don't know.
Oh yeah, it definitely is. And I just want to say, anime of the month is Haiku.
Yep.
We're working through. We hope that you guys will join us and put what you thought of the series in the Discord. There's a spot for it. So that will be next week's episode.
So stay tuned for that.
So stay tuned for that, and stay tuned to figure out what May's anime of the month will be.
Because I don't know what it is.
I don't know what it is either.
So we'll find out next week.
Yeah, we will.
And until then, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. And we'll see you guys next week.
Bye.
Bye.
TNMP, the Nerdy Misfit Podcast. Don't forget to join the island by dropping a follow. Thank you. And see you next week.